Serving English teachers in South Korea and beyond. You've reached the Midnight Runner Podcast.
The lights went out and you were not at home.
And welcome back to the Midnight Runner. It's been a while since our last podcast, hasn't it? Well, I've been totally buried in my Master's in Education TESOL program. I'll tell you what, it's just absolutely kicking my butt. Every day, at least 2 to 3 hours of work. I never thought an online program would be so difficult, but you know what? It's intense. It's good. I'm learning a lot, and it's worthwhile. But anyway, I've missed out on the podcast, and I'm sorry, but it's fun for me to do them, so I'm back. Today, we've got a great podcast interview with a special lady. The topic is giving birth in Korea as a foreigner. Now, as you can imagine, going to a hospital in a foreign country is bad enough when you speak very little of the language. It's a kind of a scary thing, right? But what about the lengthy process of pregnancy and giving birth? Now, if I were a pregnant lady, just worrying about that would be enough to put me into labor. Thankfully, I'm not a lady and I'm not pregnant. But as one of my female friends put it, God created woman, and for those whom he knew couldn't handle giving birth, well, he made them men. Well, today we'll talk to Victoria, a Canadian woman who had her baby in Seoul. What was her experience like? Well, you can find out. All you have to do is stay tuned right here. We are the Midnight Runner Podcast.
Better than high-heeled boots and miniskirts at 5 degrees below zero. You've downloaded the Midnight Runner.
Cashier says it's cool. He uses it himself. But as the wind changed direction, and my guests began to cry. The crowd caught a whiff of that crazy cat box. Wow! I really don't like it. Clean the cat box. Clean the cat box. Clean the cat box.
We're your ticket out of Hagwon Hell. The Midnight Runner.
Very nice way to come down.
Hello and welcome back to the Midnight Runner Podcast. Today we're talking about birthing and babies in Korea. Could you please introduce yourself for us and tell us what you're doing here in Korea?
Yes, my name is Victoria. I'm from Canada and I've been here for 6 years. My first 4 years I taught, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom.
When you found out you were pregnant, did you feel apprehensive about giving birth in a Korean hospital, or did you worry about that? Did you think about going home for the birth? What did you decide?
Actually, no. Our pregnancy was planned, and we knew that we would be having a baby here, so it wasn't a problem.
How far along into your pregnancy were you when you found out?
Actually, I knew the first month. Because I had some issues and I had to go to a prenatal doctor, and I was taking fertility drugs, and she told me right away that I was pregnant, and that was the first month that we tried. So.
Well, great. I bet you were really happy about that then.
Very.
Okay. What hospital did you go to?
Okay, it's quite a complex question. First, I went to a prenatal doctor in Hanam, and her name was Dr. Sung, and I stayed with her for the first 7 months. And unexpectedly, I went into labor 7 weeks before I was due, and I went to a local neighborhood hospital. And that evening, we realized that there was a lack of language skills, and we weren't able to stay at the hospital. So Dr. Sung arranged for me to go to a hospital in Hanam-dong, which was Suncheonyang. And from there, I stayed with them for 2 weeks on bed rest.
So prior to that, did you do any research into finding an English-speaking doctor, or was it just all happening so fast you didn't have a chance?
Actually, what I did is first I went to the international clinic in Itaewon to ask him some advice on where to go and what I should do, and he referred me to the doctor in Hanam.
Did you find the medical facilities were up to date compared to Western ones?
It depended on the hospital. The hospital in our neighborhood, I would say no. The medical facilities were quite old, especially the ultrasound machines. When I had gone into labor, they took me into their birthing room, and it was quite old, like a metal slat table with a leather cushion and a bar to hold on to. But once I got transferred to the other hospital, it was quite similar to our expectations.
Well, privacy in medical care is one issue that foreigners will often complain about in Korea, and I have a story myself. About 4 years ago, when I lived in Bundang, I was teaching at a private high school, and I developed a sore throat. It was quite a bad one, and I just kind of put off going to the doctor because I didn't want to mess with it. I thought I would get better on my own, but I didn't. And I talked to the school nurse at the high school, and she immediately took me to a clinic in town, which was very nice of her. She took me during her lunch break. But while we were at the clinic, I became the topic of conversation of everyone in the whole area in that clinic. There were probably 8 people there, including a doctor and a nurse or two, and they all discussed my health issue that I was in for, and I felt that was very uncomfortable because I know in America if you go in, everybody's pretty quiet, and you usually don't talk about that kind of thing in public. So I felt like I was the center of attention, and I thought, wow, I'm glad I'm in for a sore throat and not diarrhea or something like that. I didn't want to have everyone talking about that. Did you feel that privacy was an issue here in Korea, especially because you were a foreigner?
Not so much at my prenatal doctor. That wasn't a problem at all. Once I switched over to the hospital, like I said, I had been at Suncheonyang in Hanam, and I had to stay there for 2 weeks on bed rest, and I had to stay in the ward. And there was quite a bit of a lack of privacy there because it's a ward setting. And they didn't really have the same kind of rules that we have back home. Like in Canada, if you were to stay in a hospital, there's a lights out rule and you turn off the TV at certain hours, and that was quite an issue in Korea. But other than privacy, no problem.
When you say a ward setting, do you mean the setting where there are multiple beds then in the room?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you have a blind or anything you could pull over yourself?
Yeah, just like you would back home, there was a curtain that put you in between.
You might have answered this question before, but were you working up until near the time of the birth?
Well, I worked up until 7 months, and then, like I said, I had gone into labor early. I had planned on working until the 8th month, and then I was going to take the last month off. But where I had to go on bed rest, I had to leave early.
Did you have a birth plan, or was it the doctor's plan?
What I decided to do was go to a prenatal doctor for the first 6 or 7 months. I felt I got more personalized care from the prenatal doctor, and then I was going to switch over to the hospital setting doctor. So.
Did you take any special classes to prepare for the birth?
I was signed up for a class, but then with my unexpected arrival, I couldn't. So I was in the hospital right up until the day I gave birth.
Okay, so did you get any information on whether that kind of class was available in English, or would you just kind of have to rough your way through it with some help?
Actually, there is one in English, so that wouldn't have been a problem. And that was available through Dr. Sung's office in Hanam-dong.
Okay. Well, tell me about your trip to the hospital before the birth. Was it kind of a frantic thing? How did your husband know about it? How did that situation work itself out?
Okay. Well, my water broke 7 weeks early, so we kind of rushed to the local neighborhood hospital. We weren't sure what to do in that kind of situation. And when we realized there was a lack of language skills, we had to switch to the other hospital. And it was quite a scary situation at first, but I was in good hands.
But the hospital, did they figure out what was going on when you arrived?
Oh, they told me first they did an ultrasound to see if the baby was okay, and then they did a stress test to find out if I was having contractions, which I was, and I had not realized at all. Although I did have complications here with my birth, I'm very apprehensive about having a baby in Canada now because the service here was so great. I mean, yes, we did have to pay a bit extra, but there was no problem getting into the doctor. I could just walk in to the clinic and I didn't have to make an appointment. They gave me all of my ultrasound photos. They were very informative. I didn't feel rushed in or rushed out. So definitely, I'm a little bit apprehensive about having a baby in Canada.
Why is that? I'm an American, so I don't understand that.
In Canada, our healthcare is covered, but getting into the doctor can be an issue. I have friends back home that have to wait 6 weeks before they get into a doctor. And if there is a problem, you have to go to the emergency room. In Canada and here, clinics are open on Saturdays, so you can just walk in. There's not an issue at all.
Well, how did your husband find out? Was he working at the time? Did he have did you call him on the phone? What happened?
Actually, he was out walking the dog, and luckily he had a cell phone on him, so I called him right away and said, I think there's something wrong. You need to come home right away.
Ah, good. So he wasn't too far away. Okay. What was the hospital like? Did they speak English to you all the time? Or were there just a few people here and there that spoke English?
Okay, actually, I had gone to 2 hospitals, like I mentioned, Suncheongyang and Hanam-dong. I stayed there for 2 weeks for my bed rest, and during that time I realized that that facility wasn't the right facility for me. There was no problem with language, but I felt like the doctors had a lack of bedside manner, and they weren't giving me enough information that I really required. So I did transfer over to Seoul National University Hospital and found a doctor that had practiced in the U.S. for 2 years. So he was quite aware that I would ask many questions. And with him, he actually volunteered more information that I actually was going to ask. So it was very comforting.
What about the nurses? I know in a regular hospital situation when you're ill, the nurses won't bring you water necessarily. They won't take care of you like they would in the West. That's something where they rely more on your family members to do that kind of thing. Did you find the same situation?
Oh, no, not at all. I still had the little button by my bed, so if I needed something, I would just press the button and they would come and help. So that wasn't an issue at all.
Well, good to know. Did they hurry you in and out? I know that's a criticism of many Western hospitals. They want to get you in and they want to get you out the next day or two later.
Actually, no. I had a cesarean section, so it wasn't a problem. They kept me in for 5 days after the procedure, just to make sure everything was okay.
Great. Was your husband allowed in the delivery room at the time?
Unfortunately not, because I was having a C-section, which kind of bothered me, but...
But would he have been allowed in otherwise, do you think?
I'm not sure. Yes, okay. According to my husband, yes, he would have been allowed in at the time.
During the birth, did you undergo any traditional Korean customs involved in the birthing process? I know since you said it was a C-section that it was a little different situation, but I've heard of some Korean customs where they tie your arms up in the air and this kind of thing. I have no idea if they do that these days, but did you undergo anything like that?
Actually, my arms were tied to like a flat table, but other than that, there was nothing that was really out of the ordinary. However, after the procedure, they did keep me awake for about 5 hours, and they put sandbags on my stomach.
They put sandbags on your stomach?
Yes.
Afterwards? That's a Korean thing?
Yes, it is. Every time I mention it to any of my friends back home, they find it very strange and odd.
Well, another question I had from someone on the cafe was, did you have a natural birth? We already answered that. And if so, did the nurses push on your belly during the birth? Apparently common practice in Korea and Japan is to do that, and her midwife friend had never heard of that. Did you experience any of that?
No, not at all. The only time they pushed on my belly was when I was getting the epidural because I had to go into a fetal position. So other than that, no.
Did they spank the baby to start it breathing?
It was hard to tell because here in Korea, when you have a C-section, they actually put a sheet up in front of you so you can't see anything. I heard him cry, and maybe about 2 minutes later, they brought him around to me and let me see him, and then whisked him away to the ICU.
What kind of general care was available to you after the birth?
The prenatal doctor did mention that there were some clinics, some after-birth clinics, where you could go and spend time for about a month. But that was something I wasn't really interested in. I wanted to get home with my baby as soon as possible.
And that's an interesting point. I'm not an expert on this, but I know Korea does have some short-term 1 week to 1 month rest businesses and retreats where women who have babies can go. And there are some ajumma there who help care for the child and I think kind of do some teaching as far as that's concerned to a new mother. So that is available as well. I don't know anyone who has experienced that, but anyway, that's something to look into if you do have a baby in Korea. Were you allowed to room with your baby after the birth?
Not in my case because he was in ICU because he was born 7 weeks early. But if we were to go through with a regular birth, I had been informed that if I had a private room, then yes, my baby could room in with me, and that was at quite a few hospitals.
Well, if you don't mind, how much did it cost, and was it covered by insurance partially to have a baby?
This is a question for my husband.
Well, we're going to ask Stephen. This is Stephen, her husband, and you might know Stephen if you listen to my second podcast. It's a podcast about Topia Academy, and you can go back and look in the archives and find that one. He's the head teacher podcasting guy. So let's ask Stephen that question.
Well, our stay at Suncheonhyang cost us about 1 million won, and then our stay at the Seoul National University Hospital, that one cost us around 2.5 million. But that included Noah's 2 weeks in ICU. That included some stay in a private room for Victoria. That included everything that was involved with it. So in total, probably around 3.5 for the hospital care. But then we also had all the bills that came before when we were at the prenatal clinic. So I would say in total to have the baby here was close to 5 million, 6 million. That
was with complications.
Was any of that covered by the health care?
That's including the coverage. If we didn't have health care, you could look at that being doubled.
Close to 10 million with complications. Wow. Okay, well, thank you for that.
I'd also like to add, though, if anyone is considering having a baby in Korea, I have recently found out that there is extra insurance that you can take out on pregnancy insurance, just in case these complications were to arise. I would strongly suggest to anyone, even if you are covered under the national health insurance, that you do get extra pregnancy insurance.
Any idea what company that would be through?
I have no idea where that's through, but I can poke around and inform you on it, and you can update that afterwards.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Tell me more about the hospital and the situation there.
Well, my first hospital I stayed at was Suncheonhyang in Hanam-dong, and I was there for 2 weeks on bed rest. They wanted to try and make sure that I didn't go into labor, so I had to stay there for 2 weeks. Like I said, I found the facilities weren't up to my standards, and I wanted to be transferred.
Stephen, you have some strong feelings about the hospital visit that you underwent there, that your wife underwent. Could you please talk a little bit about that for us?
I was strongly for us moving from Suncheonhyang to another hospital. I think that in Suncheonhyang there was a serious lack of thought and foresight. For example, when my wife was on bed rest, there were other women in the ward who were pregnant, and then one of these women went into labor, and they took her across the hall. But instead of shutting the doors to the labor room or to the general ward, they left the door open so that the other 4 pregnant women got to hear all the screaming that was happening from the pregnancy, which could seriously induce these other 4 women who were there on bed rest. At another time, they would leave the lights on until midnight. Another occasion was when one of the pregnant lady's mothers insisted on watching TV until midnight. There was just a lack of common sense. And while they were always insisting that my wife's best care was in their wishes, and they were trying to do the best for my wife, what they had intended for best care and for her bed rest and what my opinion of bed rest were completely different. So I was adamant that they pull her out of that hospital. Often, for us to get the proper information, I would have to talk to her prenatal doctor. Her prenatal doctor would call Sun Chan-hyung and talk to the chief doctor there. Then she would call me back, and then I would call my wife to give the information to my wife. So it was just really a runaround that didn't need to happen.
The hospital was overcrowded, and I was in the maternity ward where you would be in recovery when I should have been in the gynecology ward. But they were so overcrowded that they didn't have room available, so I stayed in the aftercare ward. And a situation came up where an influx of women had come in one evening, and they didn't have room for us, so they asked us 4 women, if we'd like to be transferred to the gynecology ward. And most of the other women said no, and I was curious as to why, but they told me that it would be much quieter there. So they take me to the gynecology ward, and they take me into the room, and there are 6 beds, and I'm put in a middle bed with a man patient on each side of me. There were men in the gynecology ward.
Not a comfortable experience then.
No, not at all. And that's when I pretty much lost it and said, this is enough. This is just not the place for me. It's making more stress than anything, and I'm on bed rest, and I'm supposed to be stress-free. So that's when we decided to switch hospitals.
So the rule learned was, when in doubt, follow the Korean women and what they do.
Exactly.
You had some positive experiences, too, with some doctors and nurses. Could you tell us about that, Stephen?
Certainly. Number one, we had 2 excellent doctors that we got to work with while we were at Seoul National University Hospital. Dr. Park, who was the lead doctor, he was very attentive to our needs. Although we didn't see him on a regular basis, his first in charge, Dr. Shin, was always there to give us any information that we needed. His English was very good, but he was really shy about his English, so he was always checking to see if what he was saying was indeed correct. But those 2 doctors were just simply fantastic, and I strongly recommend that if any foreigner is going through this procedure, start looking at Seoul National University Hospital as your first place to go to. The international clinic there as well, they have 2 nurses that really do take good care of you. Although the regular nurses in the wards may not speak a lot of English, if any whatsoever, the 2 international nurses really took care of us, took care of our needs, made sure that if we had any questions whatsoever, they were right there to answer those questions. I can't speak well enough about our experience at Seoul National University Hospital. Once we made the move from Sun Chan-hyung to there, we felt we were in good hands. And from the beginning, right the moment when we walked in, to right at the end when we got to discharge Noah, it was a glorious experience.
Did you feel that the last stage of birth was hurried in any way?
In my situation, it had to be. I lost all of my amniotic fluid, and I had an emergency C-section. So it was expected.
Did you get any help with breastfeeding afterwards?
Where I stayed at Seoul National University, they have a breastfeeding campaign, and they tried to help me at the time, but because he was in ICU, I had only been able to see him twice a day for 30 minutes each time, which really wasn't conducive to breastfeeding.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today, and also thank you, Stephen. I'd like to interview your son, if that's okay. He's 1 year old now, and I have a few questions for him as well. Noah, what was the birthing process like for you? Noah, did you find it difficult when you were born and turned around and found out that a lot of the nurses weren't able to speak English to you all the time? Okay. Noah, after the birth, when you were in the care unit, did you make friends with any of the young female Korean babies? Okay. What did you think of the food at the hospital, Noah? Well, thanks for joining us, Victoria, and also Stephen. If people have any questions, they can email me and I can send some along to you guys maybe, and if you have a chance to answer those, that would be great. So look for us again on the Midnight Runner and check out some more of our stories listed below. Have a great day.